record this. Are we recording? Yep, okay. So I can put it on our YouTube channel later. So how many of you are familiar with the idea of social annotation?
We do that a little bit in class.
What?
We do that a little bit in my class, in some of my classes.
What tools do you use?
We actually just pass around a physical paper and comment on what people are writing.
Good, okay. So yeah, I've done that kind of thing as well. You can either pass the paper around, or sometimes just to break things up, I'll have people leave their papers in place, and I'll have the students move to give them a little bit of a break. But social annotation is this idea. Well, here, let me go ahead and play this YouTube clip. It's short, and I should have.
In the beginning, we spoke, turning thoughts into things that others could hear. Then we wrote, sharing our thinking forward in time and outward in all directions. Knowledge began to accelerate, to accumulate. We printed, and in just 60 years, over 20 million copies of books and texts were produced. An explosion that spread across Europe and into the furthest corners of the world. In 1945, a scientist named Vannevar Bush dreamed of an early web and browser. He foresaw trailblazers that would connect the world's information. Almost 50 years later, in 1993, Mark Andreessen and Eric Bina built collaborative annotation into Mosaic, the first graphical web browser, so that every page could be the launchpad for discussion of its content. And then they turned it off. Over the next 20 years, more than 50 projects tried to bring this vision back to life. But they were hindered by early technologies, short-term thinking, a lack of control over spam, and poor design. A small group of dreamers started to ask, why couldn't we do better? They imagined a revolutionary new capability, a new layer over the web, based on open standards, controlled by internet citizens instead of website owners, with a vision of serving all of humanity. They imagined the ability to point inside anything, pages, documents, pictures, video, and even data. The ability to contribute your own thinking anywhere without restriction, even when the comments are disabled. The ability to link into and share ideas and to preserve these links and connections forever. They called it open annotation. Out of this dream, a tiny nonprofit called Hypothesis was formed to bring this vision forward.
So we'll talk about Hypothesis as one of the tools that we've got in Moodle, but I mean, this is the basic idea that if there are resources that are available that you can access through a web browser, these open annotation or social annotation tools basically put a transparency film over the top of that, where you and your students can write notes, can ask questions, can have conversations about the content. Without actually having to have the ability to modify or comment on or edit the underlying materials. So just to give you an idea of how that works, if you all log into Moodle and go to my sandbox space that I've given you a link to and you're in. One way that we might provide resources for our students is to, for example, provide links out to particular websites. So I've got one here. I'm going to be doing my Search for Life in Universe class in the fall, and so I'm going to be pointing my students to a whole variety of different resources. I can make those links in my Moodle class so that students can click on and go out and can read this. But this is kind of a passive exercise. It's hopefully the students are reading. Maybe they're taking notes on this resource. Maybe they're not. Maybe they've opened it up just so that Moodle will know that they clicked on it and then they closed it. the idea with some of these social annotation tools is that you can use these tools to put this overlay onto these resources that as we've talked about, and your students and you then, because we're doing this within Moodle, have kind of this private space where we all have our own little transparency sheet over the top of this web page that we can start scribbling our notes. So are you all in my sandbox?
No, so, sorry, I need to do that.
That's okay.
I'm pulling it up.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So what do students need to do this? If students are working only on a tablet or a phone, are they going to be able to do this?
They should be able to do this because it's all just web pages within Moodle. If they can see your Moodle space on their phone or their tablet, they can do this. They don't have to download any special apps or filters or anything like that. No, no extensions on their browser. It's all just handled as this tool within Moodle.
Okay, and I'm in Moodle, but how do I get to your sandbox? Sorry.
If you go in your categorized course list, you should see sandboxes as a category.
I don't.
Who's talking?
Let's see, Ellen.
Let me make sure I've added you to my thing.
Is it under workshops and faculty development?
No, I may not have added you as a student in my class yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now refresh your page and look at the categorized course list again, and you should see
Okay.
that.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. So we'll talk about how to set up hypothesis and how to set up peruse all in a minute. But first, I just want everyone to, this activity that is right underneath the URL resource that links out to that what is the habitable zone page is basically one of these hypothesis activities on that. So if you, I'm actually in my course as a student here. If you click on that as a student, you basically are going to be going to that same web page at the Planetary Society. But if you look closely, you see that there is this hypothesis wrapper around that page. And when I click on that link as a student, I get a little panel of notes and tools over here. It says to create an annotation, select the text and click on the annotate button. So I'm just scrolling on this page as if I were looking at it in a web page, and oh, here's something about red dwarf stars. If I select some text, you see that there are two tools that show up. One is highlight, and highlight basically just allows me to highlight that text for me for when I come back to this web page later. It's sort of like the students sitting in their dorm room with the textbook and a yellow highlighter and highlighting material. But if you click on annotate as a student or you as a faculty member, you have the ability to add a comment. Yeah. So what makes red dwarf stars different? You know, as a student, I might ask that question as I'm reading through this material. And I can use all these different tools. You know, I can do different formatting. I can make a comment where I've added a picture. I can make a comment where maybe maybe I want to annotate this page by linking to the Wikipedia page that talks about red dwarf stars. And so I could, I could add this comment, and in my comment, I could link out to that Wikipedia resource.
Keith,
So, yeah.
I'm not seeing that when I click on that link. It just is showing me the website and no extra stuff. So I'm just wondering.
What happens if you select some text on?
Okay, sure.
You mean highlight? You're just saying highlight it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Nothing.
You're clicking on the hypothesis link or on the web link?
Habitable zone.
Yeah, I just thought I did what you.
want
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just the plain link out to the resource. This is the social annotation link.
So that's the same text, but now the ability to annotate.
Now the ability to annotate. Yep.
Okay.
So take a couple minutes, have everyone pick out something that strikes your fancy in this text. So, select to highlight some text and click on the annotate button, and let's add some annotations to this resource.
How do you, if you select something and you don't want it, how do you get rid of it?
Oh, well, let me go back to my student view here. If I can see all of the annotations that I've done. And so maybe I don't actually want to keep this annotation. I was, maybe my comment instead was, I really liked the comedy series Red Dwarf because I'm just being cheeky, and I post that. And then later I decide, oh, well, it's really doesn't really contribute much to the conversation. This, I can click on the little trash icon here to delete that comment, that annotation, and then it's gone.
Keith, if we were doing this in a real class, would all members of the class be seeing the annotations and the highlighting that we did, or is it private?
It should be that everyone should see everyone. So let me pop over to the browser where I've got the where I'm in as myself. If I open up this web page that we're annotating in the hypothesis, I will see that there are now 7 students who have come in and have done different annotations. And if I scroll through here, here is Emily's annotation, here is Olga's annotation. Okay, so let me go back in. I'm going to close this page down that I was working on as a student. I'm going to open it back up again, and if I scroll through here, yep, see, I'm seeing everyone's comments. So this takes the process of writing notes on the resource and turns it into a class-wide social activity. I can not only see the comments that came to mind as I was reading through here, but if I come down here and I'm in as a test student or test Lambda student account, I can see that one of my classmates raised this question. Oh, I didn't think about that. And so I could actually reply, that's interesting. What other solvents should we think about? And we begin to have a conversation through our annotations over this resource. that I, as a faculty member, want all of my students to engage with and to create meaning around.
Keith, are there ways, as in the Moodle forums, where you can set it up like in the Q&A so that students have to do their annotation before they see other people's?
Not for this tool. This is really, I mean, they call it social annotation for a reason, I guess, because it really is thinking about, we want to have a community come in here and support the conversation around this resource. At least I've not seen anything in Hypothesis that would say you have to do an annotation before you can see other people's annotations.
Keith, a question. So I've used this for another class, and at the time we had a lot of trouble with some of the PDF files when it was, if they were kind of scan images rather than actual PDFs.
Oh yeah, if they're not OCR, they will not work. Or they will not work well.
And are there other limitations in terms of the file type?
Basically, anything that you can view in a browser can be used for this tool.
Okay.
So let me pop back over here.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Is there a way to do it so that, I mean, I know it's social annotation, but is there a way to do it like one student at a time, or like I just have a huge class.
Right.
So I can't see 180 students all doing it to one document.
So you might be more interested in Perusall, which we'll also show today.
Okay, great.
Because that by default will take a large class. You know, I'm scheduled to have 60 students max for my online class this fall.
Yeah.
Which is a large number of students for online class, but I'm planning to use Perusall and to get all of my resources set up with it, or at least a large number of them set up in this way. And Perusall will automatically break your large class up into smaller classes. So
great.
Yeah.
And you could use this on a student's Word document, their paper. You could upload it.
Yeah. It would have to be, you would have to be able to upload it in a way that it would be accessible publicly to someone using a browser.
Oh.
So, I mean, there are other ways to annotate student work that you're having students turn into you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want students to annotate each other's papers, then what you would need to do is, well, I'll show you how to handle annotating something like a PDF.
So can I ask a question? If you, let's say you took like a image of a painting from Art Store, that could be in a browser, so that would work, and just use the sidebar for students to write responses. I can do it that way.
I mean, if you go back here, let me go back to, in addition to annotations, there are also page notes. And you know, anyone can put notes on a page. Those aren't tied to specific text. So here's an overall comment on the page. Now, this is less useful when you've got this kind of a page, when you could do an annotation that's referring to, you know, specific content. But if your page is just, here's the image, and you want students to comment on it, then doing these page notes would be a way to do that. And then everyone could see everyone's page note for that image.
And is there a way to save these notes and send them out?
That's a good question. I mean, they are unless they are deleted, they are saved in the hypothesis activity.
Okay.
I'll have to check to see if there's a way for you to export them. I know you can export annotations out of Perusall.
Keith, how did you add that page note? I see where it says it, but when I go to it, it just says there are no page notes.
Well, you won't, if you were still in this hypothesis activity, it's not going to dynamically show what I just added. So you could close it and come back in. But you see up here, whether you're in as faculty or you're in as student, you have the ability to show or hide this panel on the side.
Yeah.
Part of the tools on the panel on the side is to do a page note.
Oh, okay.
You can also got to get these Zoom windows out of the way. But let me go back into me as faculty member. I think students just have the ability to see everyone. But if I come in here to my class, oh, come on, too many Zoom windows in the way. And if I go in here, I can look at, and where is this? I can look at the comments just that Ellen made, or just the ones that Olga made. And if I click on the comment over here, hypothesis is going to take me straight to where that annotation is tagged in the text. And I can click show all again, and I will see, you know, everyone's comments. Okay. I think so. Okay. So you get rid of that.
Can I ask a question about these little like icons on the top next on the right where it says Lambda Sandbox? There's a little red drop down like arrow. What is that for? Oh, that's where new annotations come up. Is that what that is?
You're looking in as a student. So which little red arrow?
There's a little red arrow right on the top, on the upper right-hand side where it says Lambda Sandbox 5. There's like a, you know, a search icon. There's a person. There's the first one is a little downward arrow. It says show one new annotation, but
Okay.
like when would you use that? What
Well, if you did have students who happen to be at the same time, like if I'm in here now and someone adds another annotation, I'm in here as a student, that new annotation will be highlighted by that little red arrow.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I think in the interest of time, I'll just point you to a couple of resources. I mean, rather than taking time to have a discussion about how you could see using this in your courses, there's a link here that goes to a blog post at the CUNY Academic Commons talking about the pedagogy around these annotation tools. This Back to School with Annotation is actually a document from the Hypothesis website. Just talks about some of the different ways you might think about using this. You could do the annotation to begin with. So if you're pointing your students at a particular reading, and you want to make sure that when they get to this particular point in the reading, they stop and they think about some question or some comment, you could put annotations in to kind of focus their exploration of the resource. You do glossary definitions, questions, close reading. So you might want to take a look through these resources to give you some ideas about how you you might want to use it. This is kind of interesting. You know, you could take, you know, maybe your class is looking at a poem, and you have the students annotate the poem with multimedia imagery that highlights some of the imagery or themes that are being conveyed in the poem. To take that text material and turn it into a multimedia exploration.
Keith, how is this tool in terms of accessibility?
I don't have their VPAD in front of me. I think it's fairly accessible, but that's something we can look into.
Okay, thanks.
Keith, sorry for asking this. I feel like I should know, but tell me again where these resources that you're showing are.
Oh, the bit.ly link that I shared in the chat, the Zoom chat,
Oh, okay.
goes
Okay.
to this document. So
Okay,
you
got
can
it.
come back to this document whenever you want to, and click on these links to follow up some of these things.
Okay, thank you.
I will just say a couple of things about working with hypothesis. It's actually pretty straightforward. Let me pull up the hypothesis website. I mean, you might want to take some time to go here and explore. There are annotation resources for teachers, for students, and so forth. You can look through these, but just realize that the quick start guide for teachers and students here assumes that you're not using this through Moodle. And you actually don't have to. You could send all of your students to Hypothesis. They could sign up for an account. You could sign up for an account at Hypothesis. You could go to the Hypothesis site and you could create a private group for you and your students. You could enroll all of your students in that group you set up. And then you all could install a plugin for the Chrome browser. And you could all just go to any website and add annotations the way we've just talked about doing it in Moodle and share those with your group. It's a lot more complicated doing it that way though. So, I mean, you can look through these resources. This 10 ways to annotate with students is probably useful. This Hypothesis LMS app kind of describes how we have integrated into our LMS Moodle. You can look through these others, but realize that many of them deal with the situation where you're not working through Moodle. I did want to point this one though, annotation tips for students. It might be worth using, sharing this with your students so that they're a little bit more efficient and effective at how they go about annotating materials that you want them to work on. Okay, so enough of that. Let's talk about how you actually do this in Moodle. I'm going to turn editing on in my class here. I've got Hypothesis set up. Both Hypothesis and Perusall are external tools, so they use this LTI interface to go from Moodle to some third-party service. What I've done with Hypothesis and Perusall, though, is to set them up not only as external tools, but actually to have them set up to show up as activities you can just add straight from the activity chooser when you're going in to add an activity to your Moodle course. So if I highlight that gives me a little, it's an external tool, lets you set up web resources for students to share the annotation and commentary. Okay, that sounds good. I'll click add. And let's say what I want the students to annotate is this Wikipedia page on the biology experiments from the Viking landers from the 1970s. So rather than just sending my students here, I am going to call this, annotation of the Wikipedia page on Viking experiments. All you really need to do is, since Moodle already knows this is a hypothesis external tool because you selected it as a hypothesis tool, all you really need to do is give an activity name and then decide whether or not you're going to want to accept grades from the tool or not. If you accept grades from the tool, then you can actually assign grades for the annotations that your students put onto the resource. If you unselect that, the grade option goes away. If you select it, then you can specify, maybe I'm going to make this a 10-point activity. In this case, I'm going to unselect that as an option. And I'm going to save and return to course. And I have created this hypothesis activity. But I haven't told hypothesis what it is yet. So the first time I click on it, it's going to ask me, okay, well, what do you want your students to annotate? And you have the option to enter a URL for a web page or a publicly posted PDF. So I'm going to just take that URL for the Wikipedia page and select the option to enter the URL. I'm going to put the URL in here and click submit. And now this is set up as in the same kind of fashion we saw before with the other activity, except that there's no grading option across the top here.
Keith, if I did want to grade through there, you would actually grade inside of Hypothesis and not inside of Moodle?
So let me go back here to this first one where I've set up. In this one, I've set up with the grading option selected. So I can see that, let me see the post that Eleanor did. I will, I select the student. I see all of the annotations that the student made. If I want to go actually view the part of the document the student was annotating, I can click here and go to it. And then, Eleanor, I'll give you an 8 because why not? It's a workshop. And click submit grade. That clicking submit grade basically brings that grade information back through the LTI connection to Moodle, and Moodle will realize that, oh, there's an item in the grade book because I set it up to be a graded activity, and Eleanor should get an 8 out of 10 in the grade book.
Great.
Okay. So the only other thing I want to deal with hypothesis, I mean, the focus here is you're adding individual resources one at a time as hypothesis activities. You're deciding whether they're graded or not. You can view the student annotations. Students can see each other's annotations. And then the last thing I want to cover with hypothesis is, let's say that you've got a PDF and I should have set this up, but I was been too busy. Let me just put this PDF on the desktop where I can find it. So I've got a PDF that's not too big. Let's say I wanted to add a, I wanted the students to annotate a PDF that is not up on the web. But I've got a copy of it. I can add an activity. I can select hypothesis. I can click add. I can say, PDF example. And just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to make it ungraded. When I go into the hypothesis activity, I can select the other option, which is to select a PDF from my Google Drive. And I actually don't even have to have it in my Google Drive at the time. I would recommend that you're logged into your Google account before you do this, so it's a nice smooth process. Almost everybody has a Google account. If you don't, you would need to do that. And then rather than picking, well, actually, I've got some PDFs up here, but I could click upload to upload that PDF that I didn't have in my Google Drive and select it, or I could. This looks fairly innocuous, so I will select it. And what that does is hypothesis in our Moodle system negotiates with my Google account. I have basically given the hypothesis app permission to access my Google app specifically for that PDF. So this does not have to be necessarily public up on the web. So you can actually provide this kind of annotation for private-ish documents.
So can I ask two questions? So if you have a PDF, the way that you try to upload it and see if it is readable or not, is that the best way to go about just testing out your stuff?
The best way to go about testing it is to open up the PDF.
Mm-hmm.
And can you select anything?
When you're in hypothesis, you mean?
No, when you are looking at the PDF in
Oh, I see. Okay.
Preview or Acrobat Reader or whatever,
Uh-huh.
if you try to click on text in a PDF and the whole page turns blue, that tells you that there is no readable text on that page.
Okay. Okay. All right. So and my second, and so if it's not readable, then you just have to start over again, but in some way. But
If it's not readable and you've got Acrobat, the full version, not just the Acrobat Reader, you can do the OCR in Acrobat to make it readable.
Okay. And my next question is, so to get into hypothesis, to upload, like, is that right here in these social annotation tools that we're in, or is that somewhere else on Moodle?
So you would click add an activity or resource, select hypothesis, and do it now.
Show me, wait, add an activity, where are you right now? I'm sorry.
Well, you need to be in your Moodle course.
I'm in my Moodle course. I'm in your sandbox. Is that where you want me, in your sandbox?
Well, you don't have the ability to add. You don't have the ability to edit my sandbox because you're in.
Okay,
so you have to be in the Moodle space where you're the teacher.
So I'm going to my activities section.
Yeah, you turn editing on, click add an activity, and instead of adding an assignment or a forum or a quiz, you just add a hypothesis activity.
So I can go to, like, this week under the resources to add an activity, and hypothesis will now be there. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Ah, okay. So I have to go into mine. All right, I'm gonna check it out. All right, thank you.
Okay, so I want to switch over now to Perusall. I was excited about Hypothesis and being able to add that into Moodle, although what we've done for now is a respond to COVID. They're letting us do this for free. If we want to keep Hypothesis in Moodle, we're going to have to figure out that that's worth paying for down the road. But once I saw Perusall, I was very excited about it as well. It has a different kind of model, whereas with Hypothesis, you are basically putting a hypothesis wrapper around all of the different individual resources you want your students to annotate. With Perusall, you're basically, when you add Perusall to your Moodle course, it basically creates a course space for you at Perusall, kind of like the way VoiceThread works. If you add VoiceThread activities to your Moodle space, VoiceThread creates a course space for your class at VoiceThread. Let me just briefly pull up the Perusall site. This is a newer social annotation tool. It actually came out of a research project at Harvard. So I mean, if you look at some of the faculty who are involved in kicking off this research project, I don't know all of them, but I know Eric Mazur, he's done a lot of excellent work on STEM pedagogy and peer instruction, and he's, you know, so I'm kind of excited about the faculty background here, but also this will be for the foreseeable future, essentially free for our use in education. This also, as we'll talk about, has the ability to wrap this kind of annotation tool around the textbooks that you select for your class. And if you do open educational texts, as we'll look at in a minute, it's still going to be free for you and your students and for purchase. But you can also, they've got over 200,000 titles from publishers that you could, if you are going to select one of these texts for your class, you can actually bring that text into your Perusall course space and apply these social annotation tools to the textbook as well as websites and so forth. So it's a little bit different model. It's a little bit more elaborate than Hypothesis, and we'll look at that in a minute. Just will point you to this link that I've got in the workshop notes. I recommend you click on it later when you're looking at this in more detail. Perusall has a whole variety of help guides for instructors. You know, how do you add content? How do you organize your Perusall course? How do you set up assignments and so forth? So I'll go through what Perusall looks like and some of the ways for adding it to your Moodle course. If you're in my sandbox, you can all click on this Perusall class link. And this basically takes you all to the course space that has been set up at Perusall because for my sandbox course, because I've added a Perusall activity to my sandbox. And so it's basically creating a whole shadow course space that is tied to your Moodle course space. And you know, I'm not sure we'll have time to necessarily go through all of the ins and outs here, but basically this provides a space where you can upload all sorts of different documents. Once these documents are up there, you can create annotation assignments. And one interesting feature about Perusall is that you set some basic parameters about how engaged you want your students to be in terms of annotating the resource that you've set up as a annotation assignment. And the artificial intelligence algorithms that they have at Pruzol will basically look at the annotations that students are doing and will provide a provisional grade if you're setting this up as a graded activity. You know, how many annotations is each of the students making? What is the quality of the annotations in terms of you know, augmenting the content of the resource, or is it just kind of a fluff, yeah, I agree kind of annotation? So different scoring parameters that you can set given the time. I won't go through those in detail, but let me just quickly, under settings here, you know, there are some you can edit the welcome message that Pruzol will show to students when they click on any links. Won't worry about access right now. This grouping. So, you know, let's say I do have 60 students in the fall, and I don't want them all to see 60 other students' annotations when they go into a resource, because that's just too crazy. Maybe I want to, you know, might set my enrollment estimate to be 60, and maybe I want my target group size to be 10. And so Pruzol will, if you want it to, you know, randomly break your class up into smaller groups of students who are doing the social annotation, but within a more manageable group. Here's all the scoring criteria that you can use to determine how this AI scoring works. You know, there's basically a 0, 1, 2 point scale on each of the annotations, depending upon whether or not the annotations actually are contributing any content, or whether they're kind of fluff. You can set deadlines. Do late annotations contribute to the score at all? How concerned are you that students are annotating throughout the document? You know, let's say students have to do at least 5 annotations to get full credit. Maybe you don't want them to do all 5 annotations in the first paragraph of the resource, right? You want them to be more spread out. So there's all sorts of scoring criteria that you can set. You know, if I were doing a class of 200 students, I might not want to have to manually score how well each student is annotating every single resource. So having this, you know, AI preliminary scan would be quite useful. You know, I don't know that there's anything necessarily you would need to change by default under this advanced tab. So so let's talk about how this works. You, in this case, would not be wrapping annotation around individual documents in your Moodle course the way you're doing with Hypothesis. You would have the ability to add whatever resources you want. So if you click here, if you are on the documents option for, you know, course home, getting started, okay, I've started, now I want to add some documents. Go to the Documents tab, click the Add. You could add web pages like we just talked about with Hypothesis. That's easy enough to do. You can upload documents from your computer. You don't have to go through your Google Drive. Or you can add textbooks. So, you know, this will take you to a place where, let's say I actually wanted to see if there were any astrobiology textbooks in their catalog. Well, there are. Introduction to Astrobiology. Why am I not getting? That would cost $48 for my students to have perpetual access to the ebook. Well, maybe I don't want my students to spend $48, or maybe I do. Maybe I think that's reasonable. And if I'm going to have that text anyway, why not bring it into Perusall so that I can create annotation assignments around the different chapters in the textbook. This one's 56, this one is 120. I'm definitely not going to have my non-majors spend $120 on a textbook for my Gen Ed Search for Life in the Universe class. But that's an option. I have actually, for my geology class in the past, I've used an OER licensed physical geology textbook that is free for anyone to use and actually even modify if they want. I've downloaded a PDF of that book and then uploaded that whole PDF into my Perusall course space by doing the add document from my computer, select the PDF, and it comes up. So you would basically assemble your course resources in Perusall rather than putting them into Moodle. Okay, so is everyone clear about that? And then you would create an assignment around those different resources. So let me take this Viking biology page and I'll go into my Perusall course space. I will click add a web page, put in the URL, and it's going to bring that web page into the course space. Now, one nice feature of that, if Wikipedia decides at some point to take down this web page on the Viking biology lander experiments, then I still have it in my space here. I want to ask, I know it's it's almost 5 o'clock now. Are people able to stay like 5 minutes or more so to go through the rest of this? Nobody's saying no. So you would assemble your resources. You can organize them into folders if you want to do that. It's pretty simple, folder structure. And then you would create assignments. So you could do that from the Assignments tab, or you could do it from the Documents tab. So let's say I'm looking here at this web page that I just added in. I could click make this into an assignment. Since this is just a web page, I'm going to assign the entire document. I am going to specify when I want the annotations to be done. I can put in a name, annotate the Viking biology experiments page. I can put in different prompts for the annotation in this instructions for students. If I click next step, I really don't necessarily have to change this unless I want to, if I want to assign specific students to annotate this as their assignment, I could select them. But if I leave it blank, then it's going to be an assignment for everyone. I click Save Changes. Then now we have this this assignment for annotating that web page. There's an interesting option here that is click full title for LMS. If I do that, it will copy that title name that I assigned to the assignment in Perusall. And if I go into my class space here, click add an activity, and now select the perusal social annotation. If I paste in that name and leave the accept grades from tool and make this a 10-point assignment and click save and return to course, when I or any student clicks on this peruse all activity, which maybe I'm going to have that down here in week 3. If you refresh your page on the sandbox and click on it, you won't be taken to the course space. You'll be taken straight to that activity. So there is a way to not only set up your course space in peruse all, but also to have individual activities added to your Moodle course space under the the appropriate week or the appropriate module to take students straight to that that activity. The last thing I want to show, and I'm really not doing peruse all justice for matters of time, but if we go to add a new assignment, and I select my physical geology textbook, I can select, well, what materials is going to be, maybe I want students to annotate chapter 3, which is 26 pages on intrusive igneous rocks. I selected that content out of the whole textbook. I selected those pages for the annotation assignment, and maybe I'm going to give them a little bit more time to do this and annotate the igneous rocks chapter. And really, I don't need to change anything on here. Click Save Changes. Copy that full title. Come back over here into Moodle. Add an activity. Go back, select Peruse All. Paste in the Peruse All assignment name as the name for the Peruse All activity. Change it back down to 10 points here and click Save and Return to Course. And now when you as a student or when I as, let me go into the course where I'm in as a student. If I click on that, if I click on this link, I'm going to go to the course space and I'll see everything. If I click on this, I will go straight to annotating those pages from chapter 3. So I think that's pretty slick. There are some other features that you might want to look into. Since you are setting up the assignments in the perusal course space and you're setting a deadline for each of the assignments, there's essentially a calendar in your perusal course space. You or your students could actually add that calendar to your Outlook or to my my iCal calendar on my MacBook, so that I can see those assignment deadlines in my regular calendar application. I'm going to stop screen sharing here. Let me know if you've got any questions. Again,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
These tools both look so great, but how do you decide as between the two of them which one to use for a particular assignment? Like,
so if you have over the course of the semester maybe 3 or 4 times when you want your students to socially annotate something and it's available on the web, those would be easy to add as hypothesis activities. You've got this is the website I want them to annotate. Maybe it is a public domain version of War of the Worlds. I'm going to point them at that. I can add that as a hypothesis activity, just wrap hypothesis around it. And the focus is on, here's this resource that I'm adding to my Moodle course. Rather than just putting it in Moodle, I'm going to wrap hypothesis around it, and I'm going to send you there to annotate. And I'm going to either grade you or not. If you're going to use it more wholesale, and you want to use it regularly as a tool for students to engage in the readings, and you're going to regularly assign low stakes assessments, formative assessments to those, just to make sure that they're engaging with the readings and they're looking at each other's work, I probably would do Perusall. If you've got a large class and you want the class to be, broken down into smaller working groups, I would use Perusall. Perusall, we definitely will be able to keep because it will remain free for faculty and for institutions. Their business plan is, if they're going to look for any kind of revenue from this, it's not going to be from students paying, it's not going to be from faculty paying. It's going to be, if a faculty member is going to choose a textbook anyway, let's use that textbook through Perusall, and the project gets some funding from the commercial publishers from that relationship. So, Perusall is a little bit more elaborate. It probably, if you just want to set up a few things on the fly, it would be easier to do that with hypothesis. But if you're going to be more, if you're going to use it more extensively, this social annotation functionality, then personally I would probably go with Perusall.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have another question.
Sure.
This might be outside the scope of this workshop, but if you wanted to do a non-social way for your students to share their annotations, like if they're all reading the same story, and normally I would collect their readings sometimes and check their annotations.
Okay.
Do you have a suggestion of how to do that?
So,
and I apologize if this is sort of not the point of today's training.
It's all about how do we want to make sure our students are engaging with the readings, right? So, how are you distributing the readings to them? How are they annotating them, and what format are we talking about, Emily?
Well, it depends. If we continue to be remote, then I would be posting PDFs to Moodle.
Okay.
And, I like them to annotate in as many ways as they can, but normally I give them printouts and they do a hard copy.
Yeah. So, you could use Perusall for that and set the group size to 1, and Perusall would make a separate group for every student. But that would mean that your whole class functions that way, and then you're not doing any social annotation.
For the whole
Or
thing?
you use Perusall for that, and then the times when you want to do social annotation, you put hypothesis activities in.
Is that for every, so that's a setting for that's like a hard setting for your class and not for
Well, actually, now that I
assignment?
think about it, you might be able to set up different group schemas for different assignments. that would be something worth looking into.
It looked like too, I noticed, Keith, in the advanced setting, there did seem like there was a box for anonymous, and I didn't look closely at that. I was just watching as you were doing it. So I wonder if that, it might be worth looking at, that maybe if you set the annotation to anonymous, it means that this, oh no, but that would mean that the students are annotating anonymously, maybe to each other.
Yeah, students,
Not
you would
socially.
know who's making what annotations, but the students wouldn't
The
see
students
who.
wouldn't see each other from each other. Yeah,
They would
yeah.
see each other's, but they would just say, here's an annotation of this.
Got ya. Yeah. Understood. But
So,
I have the same question because in Discovering the Arts, I often do like give my students a reading and then I follow it up with like a quiz or something in Moodle so that they, respond to my prompts through the quiz. But this seems more interesting for them in terms of like how to relate, to point to prompts directly within the text. So I would like to use it as like a kind of a replacement for assignment module in that way that you're describing, Emily.
I mean, there's lots of ways that we can get our students to engage with the readings. You could do low stakes quiz assessments on the readings. I do that a lot with my classes. A lot of faculty do reading response papers. So they've read that, I want you to write this one-page paper and turn it in. This is another way to provide an activity that would ensure that the students are engaging with the reading. Okay. Well, I'm going to stop the recording.